With this relatively new information, we can't be too absolute in thinking that this discovery was an invidious disregard of African material science. Though that was the case with many observations of African technology, this particular situation seems to be more of a gray area. However, we can be confident that the era was founded on a Eurocentric or Eurasian worldview. Individuals who witnessed this technology on the continent assumed via their paradigms that Africans simply borrowed from Europe or the Middle East. Regardless, axiomatic conclusions were drawn with little to no investigation. Thankfully, some African scholars chose to explore, and with cogent review and evidence, they've literally changed how the history is taught. So what is this African technology? Well, it has to do with the material science known as glassmaking. The material science of glassmaking is complex, and thus, according to one African scholar, Abedemi Babalola, it has been excluded in consideration for indigenous African invention below the Sahara. According to a study led by African researchers, it was the Yoruba who attained the expertise that enabled them to develop a unique recipe for glass manufacture. They mined and processed feldspathic pegmatite, cobalt, titanium, rubidium, and nickel, among others, and combined these with powdered snail shells. The ancestral Yoruba material scientists were fully aware of the elemental properties of these materials. They then transformed this recipe through precise pyrotechnology techniques to produce glass and glass beads that served as the currency for negotiating political power, economic relations, and cultural spiritual values. This quote is a remarkable summary of their findings. The archaeological evidence of the Yoruba glass-making industry dates back to the 11th century. Centered at Ele-Ife in Yorubaland, the locally produced glass beads expanded throughout West Africa. Ele-Ife even seemed to have had a monopoly in the development of this material science, contributing to the elevated status of glass. Its inclusion on the beaded crowns and staffs of Yoruba rulers is evidence of this. Previously, many scholars assumed the presence of glass in West Africa was a product of European or Middle Eastern parentage. Many scholars had thought that this industry was a secondary one, using recycled and reheated glass obtained from medieval Europe and the Islamic world. Interestingly enough, in 1987, there was one noticeable African scholar who challenged this idea, albeit on deaf ears. He proclaimed, "Our ancestors were material scientists." His claims were not taken seriously in the least, but over the years, his statement came to be true. An analysis of the glass in Ele-Ife has given chemical evidence for a manufacturing site at Ele-Ife. These studies have shown that the glass objects from archaeological sites in Ele-Ife and in a 40-kilometer radius of the city have unusually high lime and high alumina contents, higher than the proportions of alumina and lime found in ancient Islamic, European, and Asian centers of glass production. This has led to the conclusion that Ele-Ife spearheaded a glass-making technology that was unique to the Yoruba culture. Ele-Ife has an extensive history of African innovation. The metallurgical technology witnessed in their classic sculptural traditions and their extensive ironworking fostered a great legacy for Yoruba civilization. One source captures this history well, especially in relation to how the invention of glass technology may have naturally developed in the Yoruba region. In or near Ele-Ife, the ready availability of local raw materials, the tradition of high-temperature technology in the form of copper alloy or ironworking, and local and regional demand for glass beads combined to stimulate primary and secondary glass technologies that would continue for many centuries. Now, this is not to say that the Yoruba were the only tropical Africans who produced glass technology. Further research is necessary before any conclusive narratives. Regardless, in modern times, we may take glass for granted, but its invention was a complex endeavor. It became a part of human civilization in many ways, and Africans are now soundly credited with that tradition. Well, I'm all, guys. If you like these videos and want to help in its continued production, consider supporting the home team on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.